Easterwood is a pastor here. He is also the director of the field office for ICE in St. Paul. So someone who claims to worship God, teaching people in this church about God, is out there overseeing ICE agents. Think about what we've experienced. The murder of Renee Good at the hands of ICE. A Venezuelan national shot by ICE. A 6-month-old baby who almost died as a result of ICE unleashing military-grade weapons on our community. How dare you claim to be a pastor of God and you are involved in evil in our community?
I was in church once back in the late 80s, early 90s, and a man walked up to the main door, the main, entrance to the church as service was actually going on. People were singing, worshiping, doing all that good stuff in church. And he started hollering at someone he knew in church, asking him a question. I don't remember what the question was, but I know he asked, and he was being really loud. I mean, this was a small church, so yeah, it interrupted a lot. And of course, we all thought that was just rude. But then the pastor got up and said, it is illegal to interrupt a place of worship. Then he followed up by saying that he would be calling the authorities. Aside from that one incident, I remember, hearing shootings across the country and all this other stuff. I've never heard anyone else going into a place of worship and interrupting a service. Haven't heard of that, probably until now, as you guys probably already know. So here we are, back in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Right? Epicenter of everything. And if you thought the so-called protesters could not get any lower, they decided to interrupt a church service. As you saw at the start of this video, a woman is heard hollering into a mic, calling out the pastor because apparently he's part of ICE. And she mentions the murder of Renee Good. And what I find funny, I find hilarious, is how she calls this illegal alien from Venezuela, who was actually being chased by an ICE agent, and then he got attacked by his buddies, and so he pulled out a weapon, shot one of them, right? But she calls him a Venezuelan national. Venezuelan national, aka illegal in the United States, right? Okay. I'm not going to comment on the baby issue because I honestly, I really don't know much about it. But we'll look up those details for another situation here. But first of all, just so, like I said, what I experienced years ago, being interrupted in a worship service, was straight up rude, disrespectful, disgraceful, and it was just completely wrong. But let me ask you this, especially for those of you out there right now that are probably watching this video. Thanks for watching, by the way. Watching this video and agreeing with what these people did in Minneapolis, interrupting a service, a Christian service, by the way, is what it looks like, really. Catholic, Christian. It sounds like it's Jesus, right, that they're worshiping. I want to ask you guys, all of you guys, even the ones that agree or disagree, all of you guys, one question, right? Would you be okay if they interrupt a worship session if they were Muslim? And the imam, the head guy of the mosque, was part of ICE? I think we all know the answer to that question. It's clear as day. So as you saw there, these protesters were heard chanting ICE out multiple times as they interrupt these churchgoers. But that's not all. We have the U.S. Assistant Attorney General Harmleet Dillon posted this on X. The Civil Rights, I believe it's division, is investigating the potential violation of the federal FACE, F-A-C-E Act by these people desecrating house of worship and interfering with the Christian worshipers. At first, I was not clear about this FACE Act because I thought it only applied to Christians who went to these abortion clinics to protest. But I found out this. It sounds, and it actually is true, that the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances, the FACE Act, explicitly applies to places of religious worship, including churches, protecting them from threats, forced intimidation, and property damage intended to interfere with religious practices alongside protecting reproductive health clinics. Again, if this stick or not, it's just a bad taste regardless. It's just to interfere with a religious activity, a religious service, a religious place of worship where people want to just come and just worship God. But again, I'm gonna ask you guys, would they do this if this was a Muslim mosque, service, worship center? I don't know. You guys do know. We all know. So along with these protesters, we get Sour Lemon Don Lemon, who went into the church to exercise his First Amendment rights and interview the pastor.
I mean, this is unacceptable. It's shameful. It's shameful to interrupt a public gathering of Christians in worship.
But there were folks who will say,
I have to take care of my flock.
okay, but listen, we live there's a constitution in the First Amendment to freedom of speech and freedom to assemble and protest.
We're here to worship. We're here to worship Jesus because that's the hope of these cities. That's the hope of the world is Jesus Christ.
I want to be very respectful. Please don't push me though.
We're here to worship Jesus. Yes. That's why we're here. Yeah. Okay, that's why we're here. That's what we're about.
Don't you think Jesus would be understanding
we're about
and love these folks?
We're about spreading the love of Jesus.
But did you try to talk to them as a
no
Christian?
one is willing to talk.
Okay.
I have to take care of my church and my family, so I asked that you actually would also leave this building.
You don't want us to chronicle what happened?
Unless you're here to worship.
I'm always worship. I'm a Christian.
We're here to worship. Yeah. We're here to worship. Okay.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
As he tries to get these agitators out of church, right? The pastor's trying to get these agitators out of church. Don Lemon comes in as the pastor tells Sour Lemon that it is disgraceful, because it's right. It's disgraceful. Fired from CNN, Sour Lemon tells him people have constitutional rights to assemble and protest. And the pastor tells him about Jesus. And Lemon asks him if he talked to them, if he talked to the protesters, and the pastor says no one is willing to talk. Which, by the way, they are acting, you can tell how they're acting right now. He also tells Lemon Boy to leave. But no, Sour Lemon decided to have his little monologue after this and put his 1 cent, because that's all it's probably worth, in the matter. You know, First Amendment, right.
This is the beginning of what's going to happen here. When you violate people's due process, when you pull people off the street, you start dragging them and hurting them and not abiding by the Constitution, when you start doing all of that, people get upset and angry. And if you remember what the Civil Rights Movement was about, the Civil Rights Movement was about these very kinds of protests. And for some reason, in our modern era, people think that in order to have protests, you got to be, cordoned off to a certain area and, what time you can protest. Look, there's nothing in the Constitution that tells you what time you can protest. You can protest at any time. That's the whole point of it, is to disrupt. It's to make uncomfortable. And that's what they're doing. And that's what I believe when I say everyone has to be willing to sacrifice something. You have to make people uncomfortable in these times. If you see how uncomfortably and how harsh people are being treated on the streets, you have to be willing to go into places and disrupt and make people uncomfortable.
He goes on to make the statements of, people having their due process violated, people being dragged off the streets, people getting hurt and not abiding by the Constitution, ICE not abiding by the Constitution, then it's okay, right? Because of all those things are present, because it's okay at that point for people to do what they're doing, interrupt church, get angry, destroy, riot. It's okay, is what it sounds like Sour Lemon is saying here. But no, sir, or ma'am, however it is Lemon likes to be addressed as, this is not how that works, buddy. It doesn't. And the fact that he is making these statements and not actually doing any real journalist work, I mean, you know, it gets people upset, and, you know, it just gets them charged up and ready to do things they shouldn't be doing. It's comical, but listen to this clown one more time.
So let me just make it clear, because this a assistant attorney general, I don't know, gosh, what's her name? It's something Hammett, Gillen or whatever. So I had no affiliation to that organization. I didn't even know they were going to this church until we followed them there. We were there chronicling protests. Once the protest started in the church, we did an act of journalism, which was report on it and talk to the people who were involved, which included the pastor, members of the church, and members of the organization. That's it. It's called journalism. First Amendment, all that stuff. For all of you people who believe in the First Amendment, absolutist, there you go. So why don't you talk to the actual person who is in charge of the organization and whose idea it was to have the protests at the church before you start blaming me for stuff for which you have no idea. Thank you for your attention to this matter.
I don't know, but to me, he sounds scared. Doesn't he? Really? Think about it. Sounds like he got his little butt cheeks off. Woo! And so now he knows that he might be in a little bit of a jam with the authorities. Those are just my opinions on this matter. I would love to hear what you guys have to say, and I'll talk to you guys later.